She said it over dessert, her words cutting through the warm air of the dining room. Sometimes I wish you were never born. Everyone laughed. My father slapped the table, a booming sound that rattled the silverware. My sisters, Erica and Lacey, giggled into their napkins, their eyes sparkling with shared amusement. It was just another one of Mom's jokes, sharp and funny, meant to keep everyone in their place. Everyone laughed, except me. Before we dive in, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below telling me, where in the world are you watching from? I set my fork down slowly, the tines making a soft clink against the porcelain plate. The chocolate cake suddenly looked bitter. I raised my eyes and met my mother's gaze. I gave her a small, faint smile, the kind you give a stranger who bumps into you on the street. Well, Diane, I said, my voice quiet but perfectly clear. The feeling's mutual. But the difference is, I actually have the power to make that wish come true. Silence spread like a frost across the table. The laughter died in their throats. My father's hand froze mid-air. Erica's perfect smile faltered. Lacey just stared, her mouth slightly open. For the first time in my entire life, I had their complete and undivided attention. That was the last night I ever sat at my mother's table. My name is Natalie Brooks. I'm 32 years old, and for most of those years, I was the invisible daughter. Growing up in our perfectly kept house in Madison, Wisconsin, I was the quiet middle child, the space between two brighter stars. My older sister Erica was the brilliant one. She had perfect grades, a razor-sharp wit, and an ambition that burned like a furnace. She was Dad's pride, the lawyer in the making who never disappointed. He would talk about her achievements at dinner parties, his voice swelling with a kind of ownership. "That's my girl," he'd say, and everyone would nod. Then there was Lacey, the youngest. She was the artist, the dreamer. With her wild blonde hair and paint-stained fingers, she was effortlessly charming. She could play a song on the guitar that would make you cry, or sketch a portrait that looked more real than the person sitting for it. She was Mom's darling, the one who needed protecting, the one who was adored for simply existing. And then there was me. I wasn't brilliant like Erica or artistic like Lacey. I was the practical one, the responsible one. I got good grades, but not perfect ones. I was helpful. I was organized. I never caused any trouble. I was the one who remembered to buy milk, who helped Lacey with her math homework, who made sure Dad's favorite shirt was clean before his business trips. I was the reliable one. My mother, Diane, once told me that when I was a child. She was looking at a school picture of the three of us. Erica was beaming, her debate club pin glinting on her blazer. Lacey was looking off to the side, a dreamy, poetic look on her face. I was just smiling at the camera, a neat and tidy smile. "You're reliable, Natalie," Mom had said, tapping my face in the photo. But reliability isn't memorable. That sentence became the wallpaper of my childhood. It was the truth I lived with every day. I was useful but not wanted, present but not seen. It was a lifetime of small cuts, tiny moments that reminded me of my place. When I was 10, I won a district-wide writing contest for a short story I'd poured my heart into. I remember running home, the certificate clutched in my hand, my heart pounding with a pride I'd never felt before. I burst into the kitchen where Mom was on the phone. I held up the certificate, my smile so wide it hurt my cheeks. She put her hand over the receiver and glanced at it. "Oh, that's wonderful, sweetie," she said, her voice distracted. A minute later, Erica walked in, holding a large, shiny debate trophy. Mom's face lit up. She ended her call immediately. "Erica, look at that! Your father is going to be ecstatic." The rest of the evening was dedicated to Erica's victory. My small paper certificate ended up on the fridge, hidden behind a grocery list. When I was 12, I discovered a love for painting. It wasn't dreamy and abstract like Lacey's work. I liked painting landscapes, capturing the quiet beauty of the world. One of my paintings was chosen to hang in the school art show. I was so nervous and excited on the opening night. My family came, but they only stayed for a few minutes. That same day, Lacey had gotten a new, expensive camera from our parents to nurture her artistic eye. Guess whose photograph, a blurry, out-of-focus shot of our dog, made it onto the family Christmas card that year? It wasn't my painting. Even as an adult, the pattern held. I became a high school English teacher, a job I loved. I found joy in helping my students find their voices, in seeing them fall in love with literature. But to my family, it was a safe, unremarkable choice. Not a high-powered law career like Erica's, or a daring bohemian artist's life like Lacey's. My birthdays were often forgotten, or remembered with a last-minute text. My calls would go to voicemail, while Erica's and Lacey's were always answered. I was the unproblematic child, which I eventually learned was just code for the one we don't have to love loudly, the one we can take for granted, the one who will always be there, quietly holding things together, asking for nothing in return. And for years, I played my part perfectly. The dinner was meant to be a celebration. Erica had just been made a junior partner at her prestigious law firm. It was a huge accomplishment, and even I felt a flicker of pride for her. Our parents, of course, were over the moon. They decided to host a lavish dinner at their house. The evening was a performance, and my family were the stars. Dad stood by the fireplace, a glass of expensive red wine in his hand, telling anyone who would listen about Erica's biggest cases. He spoke of her killer instinct in the courtroom with the same reverence he usually reserved for legendary football players. Mom floated through the living room, her smile bright and brittle, making sure everyone's glass was full. She kept touching Erica's arm, as if to absorb some of her success. "We always knew she was destined for great things," she said to an aunt, her voice full of emotion. After the main course, Lacey, at Mom's insistence, brought out her guitar. She played a new song she'd written, a melancholy tune about lost love. It was beautiful, and when she finished, the room erupted in applause. Mom had tears in her eyes. "Oh, Lacey," she whispered, hugging her tightly. "You feel everything so deeply." I sat at my end of the table, sipping my water, feeling like a ghost. I had my own piece of good news, something I was genuinely proud of. I waited for a lull in the conversation. "Actually, I have something to share too," I said, my voice sounding small in the suddenly quiet room. All eyes turned to me. One of my students, a boy named Kevin, just won the state essay award. He's the first student from our school to win in over a decade. He's getting a full scholarship to the university. I smiled, hoping to see a spark of interest in their eyes. Instead, I saw polite indifference. "Oh, that's nice, dear," Mom said, already turning to grab the wine bottle. "More wine, Erica?" My father just grunted and launched into another story about Erica's first mock trial in law school. The conversation moved on, leaving my small victory behind. An unimportant little stone skipped across a vast lake. I felt that old, familiar feeling wash over me. The feeling of being invisible, of shrinking in my chair until I was nothing but a shadow. But I stayed silent. I ate my food. I smiled when I was supposed to. I had been doing it my whole life. I just had to get through dessert. As Mom brought out a rich chocolate cake, the mood turned nostalgic. They started telling old family stories, anecdotes that were supposed to be funny but always seemed to have me as the punchline. They brought up the time when I was 7, and Erica and Lacey convinced me I was adopted. They'd packed a small bag for me with an apple and a pair of socks and told me my real parents were coming to get me from the bus station. Poor Natalie, Mom laughed, shaking her head. "You sat on the front porch for 2 hours. You actually believed it." The room roared with laughter. Dad slapped the table again, his face red with amusement. My sisters giggled, looking at me with a mixture of pity and fondness, the way you'd look at a clumsy old dog. I tried to smile along, to pretend it was funny, but the memory wasn't funny to me. I just remembered the cold fear in my stomach, the feeling of utter abandonment as I watched the sun begin to set, wondering why my real parents were so late. The jokes kept coming. The time I tripped on stage during a school play, the time I got a terrible haircut and cried for a week. Each story was a reminder of my role, the gullible one, the overly sensitive one, the one who was easy to tease. Then Mom leaned back in her chair, a sweet, satisfied smile on her face. She looked around at her family, at her successful daughter, her artistic daughter, her proud husband. Then her eyes landed on me, and that's when she said it. "Sometimes I wish you were never born." And they laughed. They laughed as if she'd just delivered the cleverest punchline in the world. It was the perfect ending to their performance, the final cutting joke at my expense. In that moment, something inside me didn't just break. It turned to ice. The years of quiet hurt, of feeling invisible, of swallowing my disappointment, it all solidified into a single, cold, hard thought. I was done. I stopped laughing with them forever. Back in my small, quiet apartment, the silence was deafening. I sat on my couch in the dark, replaying her words over and over. I wish you were never born. It wasn't the words themselves that hurt the most. It was the laughter that followed. The easy, thoughtless laughter from the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. They didn't see me as a person with feelings. They saw me as a character in their family story, a supporting role that existed for their convenience and amusement. Every birthday they'd forgotten, every achievement they'd dismissed, every time they'd called me too sensitive when I was hurt by their cruel jokes, it all clicked into place. This wasn't just a bad night. It wasn't a slip of the tongue. It was a pattern, a lifetime of being tolerated, not loved. They never truly saw me. They saw a quiet, reliable daughter who would absorb their neglect and never complain. I was the sturdy, unadorned pillar holding up the more beautiful parts of the family architecture. And tonight, they had casually admitted that the pillar was something they wished had never been built at all. A strange calm settled over me. There was no anger, no tears, just a profound, chilling clarity. You can't make someone value you. You can't beg to be seen. You can't earn the love that should have been given freely. And that night, sitting alone in the dark, I made a decision. I would give them exactly what they wished for. I would vanish from their lives. The next morning, I woke up with a purpose I hadn't felt in years. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and a cup of coffee and started applying for teaching jobs in other states. Seattle, Portland, Denver, anywhere that was far from Madison, Wisconsin. Anywhere I could breathe. By noon, I had sent out 12 applications. The next step was to cut the digital cords. I opened my phone and blocked my parents' and sisters' numbers. I removed myself from the family group chat, my thumb hovering over the Leave Group button for only a second before I pressed it firmly. It felt like severing a rope that had been choking me my entire life. I went to the post office and filed a change of address, redirecting my mail to a P.O. box. I didn't pack a bag and run. My vanishing was by design. It was quiet, methodical, and absolute. I sold my furniture online. I gave my 2 weeks' notice at my job, telling my principal I was relocating for a family reason, which was true in a way. I was leaving for the sake of the family I was going to build for myself. For the first time in my life, silence wasn't a punishment. It wasn't the cold shoulder from my mother, or the empty space at the dinner table where my presence was ignored. This silence was mine. It was freedom. They wanted a life without me in it? They could have it. The calls started about a week later. They went straight to my voicemail, little digital ghosts I would listen to before deleting them. First, it was Erica. Natalie, this is ridiculous. Whatever Mom said, you know she didn't mean it. Call us back. You're being dramatic. Then Lacey. Natty, please call me. Mom is really upset. We miss you. Her voice was soft, but it still felt like a performance. Then, finally, my mother. Natalie, honey, call your mother. We're worried. Her voice was tight with annoyance, not concern. The messages piled up. Their tone slowly shifted from irritation to confusion, and then to a raw, unfamiliar panic. One evening, there was a loud knocking at my apartment door. I looked through the peephole. It was my mother. Her face was pale and her eyes were red-rimmed. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. Natalie? Please, honey, I know you're in there. Please open the door, she called out, her voice cracking. We're sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean it. It was a horrible joke. I stood there, my hand on the doorknob, my heart a stone in my chest. The little girl in me, the one who had waited on the porch for parents who weren't coming, wanted to open the door. She wanted to believe the apology. But the woman I was becoming knew better. An apology couldn't erase 32 years of invisibility. It couldn't heal 1,000 small cuts. I stayed silent, listening as her knocking faded and her footsteps retreated down the hall. 2 weeks later, I got a job offer from a high school in Seattle. I accepted it without hesitation. I packed my few remaining belongings into my car and drove west, not once looking in the rearview mirror. As I left, their perfect family, the one I had never truly been a part of, began to crack. Without me to organize the holiday gatherings, they fell apart. Without me to mediate between Erica's sharp ambition and Lacey's fragile sensitivity, they argued. Without me as their quiet, reliable scapegoat, they had to face the flaws in themselves. I heard through a cousin, months later, that they were falling apart. I felt nothing. Seattle was gray and rainy. and I had never felt so much sunshine in my life. The city gave me something Wisconsin never had: anonymity, and with it, a chance to become someone new. Someone defined by me, not by my place in a family portrait. My new students were bright and curious. My colleagues at the school were kind and treated me as an equal. They valued my opinions in meetings. They invited me out for coffee. They saw me. I started smiling again, real smiles that reached my eyes. I explored the city, fell in love with the smell of the ocean and the sight of the mountains. One rainy Saturday, I was in a bookstore downtown, browsing the classics section. I was holding a worn copy of Jane Eyre. "That's one of my favorites," a man's voice said beside me. I turned. He had warm brown eyes and a kind smile. He introduced himself as Daniel Hayes, the owner of the store. We started talking about books, and that conversation changed my life. With Daniel, I was never invisible. He listened when I spoke. He remembered the little things I told him. He loved me not for being reliable or practical, but for being me. He loved my quiet strength, the passion I had for teaching, the way I saw the world. He saw all the parts of me my family had overlooked. We were married a year later, a small, quiet ceremony under a canopy of cherry blossoms in a public park. There was no Brooks family in sight. It was just us, a few close friends, and a future that felt bright and full of promise. When our daughter was born, I held her in my arms and looked into her perfect, tiny face. I thought about what it means to be wanted, to be loved from the very first breath. I named her Grace, because she would grow up every single day knowing, without a shadow of a doubt, that she was wanted, that she was a gift, that her existence was a cause for celebration, not a punchline. Years went by. My life in Seattle was full and happy. I had a loving husband, a beautiful daughter, and a career that I found meaningful. The ache of my past had faded into a dull, distant scar. Then, one day, a letter arrived. The handwriting on the envelope was my mother's. My first instinct was to throw it away, to protect the peace I had worked so hard to build. But curiosity, or maybe the need for a final quiet closure, made me open it. It was a long letter, full of apologies, regrets, and words that were years too late. She wrote about how the family had fallen apart, how much they missed me, how she finally understood the damage her words had done. I read it, and I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel triumph. I felt a quiet sadness for the woman who had to lose a daughter to finally learn how to see her. I never wrote back. I didn't hate her anymore, but I didn't owe her access to my new life. I didn't owe her forgiveness. My peace was my own, and it was not up for negotiation. Her wish in the end had come true. The daughter she wished had never been born was gone from her life. But in losing me, she had lost the quiet center that held her world together, and I, the invisible daughter, had finally found my balance. I had found my own world, a world where I was not only visible, but cherished. So if someone ever looks at you, someone who is supposed to love you, and tells you they wish you didn't exist, believe them. Don't fight to prove your worth. Don't scream to be heard, just put your fork down. Smile faintly, and walk away. Let your absence teach them what your presence once gave so freely. Let them live in the quiet, empty space where you used to be.